All right, so are you ready to dive into the world of startups? We're taking a deep dive into Peter Thiel's 0 to 1. This book is, it's not your typical business guide.
Oh, definitely not. This one is about challenging every assumption you've ever had about success and innovation.
And who better to guide us than Peter Thiel, right?
Right. I mean, this isn't just some armchair theorist. This guy co-founded PayPal.
Oh yeah, and Palantir.
Palantir too. Mm-hmm. He was also an early investor in Facebook and SpaceX. I mean, he's been in the trenches building companies from scratch.
Exactly. So he's not just talking the talk, he's walked the walk. And 0 to 1 is packed with his unique, often contrarian insights. We're going to unpack his take on everything from competition to monopolies.
Even the power of secrets.
To the power of secrets. But it's not just about understanding Thiel's ideas, right? It's about how you can apply them. So throughout this deep dive, think about your own work, your own ambitions. How can you go from 0 to 1 in your own life?
That's the question.
That's the question. Okay, let's jump right in. One of the first things that Thiel does is challenge our very idea of progress. He says there are two types, horizontal and vertical.
Most of us, we get caught up in what he calls horizontal progress, basically globalization, copying what works. He calls it going from 1 to N. Think of it like this. You've got a successful burger joint.
Okay.
So you open 10 more, just like it. Same burger, same fries, different locations.
Okay, I get it. But what's wrong with that? Isn't that how businesses grow?
It's growth, sure, but Thiel argues it's not really progress. It's just doing more of the same.
Yeah.
He would point to China as a prime example. They've had massive economic growth by copying existing technologies.
Yeah.
But has it solved all their problems? Not really. They're dealing with pollution, resource scarcity, things that copying alone can't fix.
So that's where vertical progress comes in.
Exactly. Vertical progress is about technology, doing something truly new, going from 0 to 1. Instead of opening 10 more burger joints, you invent a completely new food. A food no one has ever seen or tasted before.
Whoa.
That's the kind of leap that can fundamentally change things.
Okay, that's a pretty powerful image. But what does this mean for the average person? If I'm not about to invent a new food, why should I care about the difference between horizontal and vertical progress?
Well, think about your own work, right? Are you focused on just doing more of the same? Or are you pushing the boundaries, trying to create something truly innovative? Even in a traditional field, there are ways to apply this. Maybe it's finding a completely new way to market your product, or developing a groundbreaking new training program. Thiel would say the real opportunities lie in that vertical progress.
Now, this is where Thiel really throws a curveball. He says competition is a lie.
Yeah.
Seriously. Isn't competition the cornerstone of capitalism?
That's what we're taught. But Thiel argues that competition is more of a mindset, like we've been conditioned to accept. Not some inherent law of nature. He actually draws on personal experience here. He talks about the insane competition for Supreme Court clerkships.
Yeah.
Something he himself went through.
I can imagine that was pretty cutthroat.
It was. And looking back, Thiel realized that winning that particular competition might have actually been a detour on his path to real success. He makes the point that sometimes we get so obsessed with beating others that we lose sight of what truly matters.
So it's not just about winning for the sake of winning.
Exactly. Thiel uses another great example, the rivalry between Larry Ellison of Oracle and Tom Siebel of Siebel Systems. These guys were ruthless.
Oh, yeah.
There's this crazy story about Ellison sending truckloads of ice cream sandwiches to Siebel's headquarters to try and poach employees.
Whoa. That's next level competition. But I see his point. Sometimes we get so caught up in the game that we forget why we're playing in the first place.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Yeah.
Thiel argues that competition, on a larger scale, often creates what he calls a power law dynamic, where a few winners take almost everything, leaving everyone else scrambling for scraps.
So what's the alternative? If we're not supposed to compete, what are we supposed to do?
Thiel's answer is to create what he calls a creative monopoly. I know we're conditioned to think monopolies are bad, but he's not talking about companies that crush competition through shady tactics. He's talking about companies that are so good at what they do that they create entirely new categories.
Okay, I need an example here.
Think about Google. They didn't just make a slightly better search engine. They dominated the entire search market, essentially creating a category of one.
Yeah.
Or Apple with the iPhone. They didn't set out to make a slightly better flip phone. They revolutionized the way we interact with technology.
So what's the lesson for the listener? Should we all be striving to create monopolies?
Well, it's not about literally becoming a monopoly in the traditional sense. It's about thinking bigger, right? Instead of trying to be marginally better than your competitors, what if you created something so unique and valuable that it transcended the existing competition altogether?
So how do you even begin to do that?
That's where the next big idea from 0 to 1 comes in, the last mover advantage. We've all heard the phrase first mover advantage, right? Get there first, grab market share, and you're golden.
That's the Silicon Valley mantra.
But Thiel flips that on its head. He says it's often better to be the last mover, the one who comes in and makes the final defining improvement that captures the market for the long haul.
He uses Amazon as an example, right?
Exactly. They started with a very specific niche, books. Dominated that market, then leveraged that dominance to expand into other areas. They didn't try to be everything to everyone from day one.
So it's about being strategic, picking your battles, and playing the long game. But how do you know when you've found the right niche, the right moment to make that last move?
That's the million-dollar question. It's about deep understanding of your market, your product, and what customers truly value. But the key takeaway here is to shift your thinking. Don't get caught up in the frenzy of being first. Focus on building something so good that it becomes the last word in its category.
All right, next up. Thiel tackles something that always gets people riled up, luck versus skill. He's pretty clear on where he stands. Success isn't just about being lucky.
He thinks we've become a little too obsessed with the idea of randomness. We look at people like Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg and say, oh, they were just in the right place at the right time. Thiel argues that while luck plays a role, it's not the whole story.
He talks about a shift in our thinking, right? From a definite view of the future to an indefinite one.
Exactly. In the past, people believed they could shape their own future through hard work and planning. Now we're more likely to think, well, who knows what the future holds? It's all just chance.
I see his point. Sometimes it feels like the world is changing so fast that it's impossible to plan for anything.
That's the indefinite future mindset. And Thiel argues that this mindset can be paralyzing.
So how does this indefinite future thinking actually show up in our lives?
We will take your career, for example.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel pressured to be like a jack of all trades, to have a finger in every pie? Even if it means spreading yourself thin and not really excelling at anything.
Yeah.
That's the indefinite future pushing you to diversify instead of going all in on what you're truly passionate about.
Or how about investing? Do you find yourself constantly diversifying your portfolio, spreading your money across a bunch of different things without really committing to any one thing? That's indefinite future thinking too.
And in a broader sense, think about politics, right? Short-term thinking, focusing on immediate popularity over long-term vision. That's the indefinite future influencing our leaders.
So what's the antidote to this indefinite future thinking?
Thiel calls it definite optimism. The belief that the future can be better if we actively work to make it so. It's about having a clear vision, a plan, and the conviction to see it through. And that's where startups come in.
Because startups are all about shaping the future.
Exactly. They're about taking an idea, a vision, and making it a reality. Instead of being passive observers, entrepreneurs are actively creating the future they want to see.
Okay, I'm really starting to get how all these ideas connect, but there's one more piece of the puzzle I want to understand, Thiel's idea of secrets.
Yes, secrets. This is one of the most intriguing parts of 0 to 1. Thiel believes that there are still secrets out there, truths that are valuable precisely because they're not widely known.
But in the age of the internet, when information is everywhere, are there really any secrets left?
Thiel would say absolutely. Think about it. Airbnb, Uber, Facebook, these were all companies built on seemingly simple but powerful insights that most people overlooked. The secrets are out there, but you have to be willing to look for them.
Okay, so how do we find these secrets? Is it like some kind of treasure hunt?
It's more like a shift in perspective. Thiel suggests looking for things that people aren't talking about, the taboos, the unspoken assumptions. He asks, what valuable company is nobody building? What truth is everyone ignoring?
That's a pretty great challenge to leave our listeners with. What secret are you going to uncover? But before you head off on your secret finding mission, we've got to cover one more crucial element of building a company, the team.
Oh yeah, the team. Thiel dedicates a significant part of 0 to 1 to this very topic. And he's got firsthand experience, especially with the legendary PayPal Mafia.
So the PayPal Mafia.
We're talking about, the folks who went on to found companies like Tesla, SpaceX, LinkedIn, YouTube.
The PayPal Mafia is like a real-life superhero origin story. Yeah. What's the secret to their success? Was it just pure talent?
Well, talent was definitely part of it. But Thiel emphasizes something even more important. Relationships. These weren't just colleagues. They were friends, collaborators, a tight-knit group who genuinely enjoyed working together. He's adamant that strong relationships built on shared values and a deep sense of mission are the foundation of any great team.
So it's not enough to just hire a bunch of smart people?
Nope. It's about finding people who not only have the skills, but also the right fit. People who believe in the mission, who are excited to work alongside each other. Thiel puts it this way. Why would the 20th employee join your company instead of Google? What are you offering that's truly unique and compelling?
That's a question every leader should be asking themselves. And that's a great place to wrap up part 1 of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground: progress, competition, luck, secrets, and the importance of building a great team.
But we've only just scratched the surface. In part 2, we'll dive even deeper into Thiel's insights, exploring how he thinks about distribution, technology, and the future itself. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. Last time we left off with the idea of building a killer team. But even with the best team in the world, you're going to need to figure out how to get your product into the hands of customers.
That's where distribution comes in, right?
Yeah.
Thiel dedicates a whole chapter to this in 0 to 1. He's adamant that distribution is just as important as the product itself. You can have the next iPhone, but if nobody knows about it, it's not going to change the world.
He even goes so far as to say a great product with poor distribution is a bad business.
Yeah, it is. But he makes a valid point. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of building something new and kind of forget about the unglamorous side of things.
Right.
Actually getting it into the hands of people who will use it.
So what are some of the ways companies can nail distribution?
Well, Thiel breaks down a few different strategies. There's complex sales, where you're dealing with high-priced products and a smaller number of customers. Think of something like SpaceX landing billion-dollar contracts with NASA.
Right.
That's not a sale you can just close with a catchy ad campaign. It's about building deep relationships, understanding the intricate needs of your customer, and navigating complex negotiations.
That's a whole different ballgame than selling something like, say, a consumer app.
Exactly. And for those types of products, Thiel talks about personal sales building individual relationships, especially in the early stages. He uses the example of Box, a company that went from a dorm room project to a billion-dollar business.
How do they do it?
They focus on personal connections. They started by targeting small groups within organizations, like a sleep clinic or a university department, and building from there. It was a very hands-on approach, getting to know individual users, understanding their needs, and building trust.
So starting small but thinking big.
Precisely. Then there's the approach we're all familiar with, marketing and advertising. Thiel has some interesting thoughts on this, including a funny anecdote about how PayPal hired James Doohan.
Wait, Scotty from Star Trek?
Yep, Scotty from Star Trek to be their spokesperson.
Seriously?
It's a big gamble, and it didn't really pay off. Thiel uses it as an example of how even brilliant minds can sometimes misjudge what will resonate with customers.
It's a good reminder that marketing isn't just about throwing money at a problem.
Exactly. And of course, there's viral marketing, the holy grail of distribution. Think about how quickly Facebook and PayPal grew. Every time someone shared a post or made a payment, they were essentially bringing more people into the network. It's the ultimate word-of-mouth marketing.
But isn't that just luck? Some products go viral, others don't.
There's an element of luck for sure. But Thiel argues that you can increase your chances by designing your product with virality in mind. Think about how inherently shareable something like Facebook is. That wasn't an accident.
So there's no magic formula, but there are definitely things you can do to stack the odds in your favor.
Exactly. But the key takeaway from Thiel's entire discussion on distribution is this. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. You have to find what works for your specific product and market.
He also talks about this idea of the power law of distribution, right?
He does. He argues that one distribution channel is likely to be far more effective than all the others combined. So the challenge is to find that one channel that really moves the needle for your business and go all in on it.
All right, let's talk about another area where Thiel really challenges conventional wisdom, his take on clean tech. This was a hot sector in the 2000s. Lots of hype, lots of investment.
And ultimately a lot of disappointment. The clean tech bubble is a great case study for a lot of the themes in 0 to 1.
Thiel argues that many clean tech companies failed because they didn't have good answers to the 7 fundamental questions that every business needs to address.
And those are?
The engineering question. Is your product 10 times better than what's already out there? The timing question. Are you entering the market at the right moment? The monopoly question. Are you starting with a big share of a small market?
Okay, that's 3. What are the rest?
The people question. Do you have the right team in place? The distribution question, which we just talked about. Can you get your product to your customers? The durability question. Will your market position be defensible 10 or 20 years down the road? And finally, the secret question. Have you identified a unique opportunity that others don't see?
Wow, that's quite a list. It makes you realize how much goes into building a successful company.
It does. And Thiel argues that many clean tech companies stumbled on several of these questions.
Take the engineering question right. A lot of clean tech companies were creating products that were only marginally better than existing solutions. They weren't offering that radical 10x improvement that Thiel sees as essential.
He uses Solyndra as an example, a solar panel company that went bankrupt despite raising over $1 billion in funding.
Yeah, their problem. Their cylindrical solar cells were actually less efficient than traditional flat panels. Innovation for the sake of innovation wasn't enough. They didn't solve the engineering question.
Then there's the timing question.
Yeah.
A lot of clean tech companies got caught up in the hype cycle and the influx of government subsidies.
Yeah, they assumed the momentum would last forever. But it didn't.
Thiel contrasts them with Tesla, which was able to capitalize on that window of opportunity when government support for clean tech was at its peak. They secured a massive loan from the Department of Energy and used it to scale their business. It was a gamble, but it paid off.
And timing isn't just about external factors, it's also about internal milestones, hitting key product development goals, or securing strategic partnerships at the right moment.
Okay, so we've got engineering and timing. What about the monopoly question?
This is where Thiel argues that many clean tech companies went wrong. Instead of focusing on dominating a specific niche, they tried to be everything to everyone.
They were competing in crowded markets, offering solutions that weren't truly differentiated.
Exactly. And without that clear focus, that dominant position in a niche market, it's incredibly hard to build lasting value.
Okay, what about the other 4 questions? People, distribution, durability, and secrets.
Thiel argues that many clean tech companies fell short in these areas as well. They often lacked experienced leadership teams, struggled to reach their target customers, and failed to anticipate how changing market conditions would impact their long-term viability. And many of them were chasing the same conventional wisdom, lacking that unique insight, that secret that could give them a real edge.
But he does point to Tesla as an example of a company that got many of these questions right.
They had a superior product, they timed their market entry perfectly, they focused on a specific niche, high-performance electric cars, and they built a powerful brand.
It's a reminder that even in a challenging sector like clean tech, it is possible to succeed if you have a solid foundation. Thiel talks a lot about the importance of founders in 0 to 1. He goes deep into what he calls the founder's paradox.
Yeah, he points to iconic figures like Howard Hughes, Bill Gates, and Steve Jobs. These were all incredibly successful visionary founders, but they were also known for being, well, a little different.
Outliers, rebels, mavericks, people who didn't necessarily fit the mold.
Exactly. Thiel argues that these founders were often outsiders, people who didn't quite belong, which gave them a unique perspective. They were willing to challenge the status quo, to see things differently.
But there's a flip side to that, right? Those same qualities that make them great can also lead to problems.
Absolutely. The very traits that allow founders to see beyond the conventional can sometimes make them difficult to work with, prone to making risky decisions, even prone to self-destruction. Think about Howard Hughes, who went from being a brilliant aviator and filmmaker to a recluse living in fear.
It's a reminder that success can be a double-edged sword.
Thiel's point is that founders are complex individuals. He calls it a paradox because they often possess this unique blend of brilliance and flaws.
So what's the lesson here for aspiring founders? Should they try to cultivate eccentricity?
It's not about trying to be someone you're not. It's about embracing your individuality, your unique perspective on the world, but it's also about being self-aware, recognizing your weaknesses, and building a team that can complement your strengths.
Okay, so let's say you've got the founder thing figured out, you've built a great team, you've got a product, you've nailed distribution. What's next?
Well, that's where Thiel gets really philosophical. He asks, what kind of future do we want to create? He argues that we have a choice. We're not just passengers on this ride.
He lays out 4 possible scenarios.
He does. Recurrent collapse.
Yeah.
The idea that history repeats itself, that we're doomed to cycles of boom and bust. Extinction. The most extreme scenario, some catastrophic event wipes us out.
Those don't sound very appealing. What are the other 2?
There's flatline, a future of stagnation where technological progress stalls and we're basically just treading water. And then there's takeoff, a future of accelerating progress driven by groundbreaking new technologies. Think flying cars, cures for diseases, maybe even colonizing other planets.
So which scenario does Thiel think is most likely?
He's a definite optimist, right?
Yeah.
He believes in the power of technology to solve problems and create a better future.
But he also acknowledges that it's not a given.
Exactly. He emphasizes that progress isn't automatic. It requires effort, innovation, and a belief that the future can be better than the present.
So it's not about predicting the future, it's about creating it.
Exactly. And Thiel believes that startups are the key. They're the ones pushing the boundaries, taking risks, and building the future we all want to see.
Okay, I'm starting to get how all these pieces fit together. Thiel's vision is really about empowering individuals to shape the future through entrepreneurship and innovation.
He challenges us to reject the indefinite future, that sense that things are just happening to us, and embrace a definite optimism, a belief that we can actively create the future we want.
And that's a pretty inspiring message to end on.
It is. But before we wrap up part 2, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the power law. Thiel argues that this is one of the most important concepts to understand, not just in business, but in life in general.
Remind us what the power law is all about.
It's the idea that a small number of things are responsible for a large proportion of the results. Think about it like this. 80% of your sales might come from 20% of your customers, or 80% of your happiness might come from 20% of your activities.
Okay, I see where this is going. If we can identify those key things, the 20% that really matters, we can focus our efforts on them and get a much bigger impact.
Exactly. And Thiel argues that this applies to everything from building a company to investing to even managing your time. It's about understanding that not all things are created equal.
So the challenge is to figure out what those key things are and focus our energy there. Don't get caught up in the noise, the distractions, the things that don't really move the needle.
It's a powerful idea, and it's one that Thiel returns to throughout 0 to 1. In part 3, we'll explore how he thinks about applying the power law to everything from building a team to making decisions to thinking about the future itself.
Stay tuned for the final part of our deep dive. All right, welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into 0 to 1. We've covered a lot of ground, from the paradox of progress to the importance of distribution.
And we've learned that even in a world obsessed with competition, Peter Thiel believes the real key to building a lasting company is to escape competition altogether.
He calls it creating a creative monopoly right, becoming so good at what you do that you essentially create a new category of one.
Exactly. Think Google, Apple, Amazon. They didn't just outcompete their rivals, they transcended the existing playing field.
But even with the most innovative idea, you need to be able to get your product into the hands of customers.
Absolutely. And as we discussed in part 2, Thiel has some pretty unconventional thoughts on distribution. Forget the traditional playbook. He's all about finding that one channel that really moves the needle for your specific business and going all in on it.
We also talked about the importance of timing, recognizing those unique windows of opportunity and seizing them.
And of course, the power law. That idea that a small number of things are responsible for a huge chunk of the results.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. The power law applied to, well, everything.
Thiel argues that once you understand the power law, you start seeing it everywhere.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me some examples.
Let's start with building a team. We've talked about how crucial it is to have the right people, folks who are not just talented, but who share your vision and values.
Right, like the legendary PayPal Mafia. Those were some serious power law players.
Exactly. And Thiel would argue that when it comes to building a team, the power law is in full effect. That one or two key hires, those absolute rock stars, can have a disproportionate impact on the success of your company.
So it's worth putting in the extra effort to find those A-plus players.
Absolutely. Don't settle for mediocrity. Seek out the best, the brightest, the most passionate individuals who truly align with your mission.
Okay, so power law applies to hiring. What else?
Decision making. Thiel argues that most of our decisions don't really matter that much. It's that small handful of critical decisions, the ones that fundamentally shape the trajectory of our lives or our businesses, that truly make a difference.
So it's about figuring out what those big decisions are and focusing our energy on making the right call.
Exactly. Don't get bogged down in the minutia. Identify those pivotal moments and invest the time and energy to make informed, thoughtful choices.
This is making me think about all the time I waste agonizing over things that, in the grand scheme of things, don't really matter.
It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, but the power law reminds us to zoom out to keep the big picture in mind.
Okay, what about the power law applied to the future?
This is where Thiel gets really fascinating. He argues that we tend to overestimate the impact of gradual change and underestimate the impact of sudden transformative events.
So we're good at predicting incremental progress, but blindsided by those big leaps forward.
Precisely. Think about the invention of the internet. No one really saw that coming, but it completely revolutionized the world. Thiel believes we're on the cusp of more of these types of transformative breakthroughs.
But we don't know when or where they'll come from.
Exactly. He challenges us to stay curious, to embrace the unknown, and to be prepared for the unexpected.
So the power law, in a way, is about recognizing that the future is not evenly distributed.
It's about those moments of sudden explosive change that disrupt everything we thought we knew.
Thiel's vision of the future is certainly thought-provoking. But at the end of the day, what's the takeaway for the listener? What's the one thing you hope they walk away with from our deep dive into 0 to 1?
If there's one core message that permeates this entire book, it's this. The future is not something that just happens to us. It's something we create.
That's a powerful idea.
It is. Thiel challenges us to reject the indefinite future, that sense that things are just unfolding beyond our control. He wants us to embrace a definite optimism, a belief that we can actively shape the world we want to live in.
And that's where entrepreneurship comes in.
Exactly. He sees startups as the engines of progress, the vehicles for turning bold ideas into tangible realities. He urges us to think big, to challenge the status quo, and to never underestimate the power of one person with a truly great idea to change the world.
So in a way, 0 to 1 is a call to action. It's a blueprint for anyone who wants to make a dent in the universe, who wants to build something meaningful, something that leaves a lasting impact.
It's about going beyond just copying what works and daring to create something truly new.
From 0 to 1.
Exactly. And that's a journey we all have the potential to embark on, regardless of our background or our field.
We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into 0 to 1. It's a book that challenges us to think differently, to embrace uncertainty, and to believe in our own power to shape the future.
And as Peter Thiel would say, the best time to start building that future is